You are not your job. So why does your job define you? We live in a world where self-identity has become enmeshed with work with dangerous implications. In this video, I'll dive into the risks, the reasons, and what you can do to disassociate your identity from your job. My life is my job, so what? What can go wrong when your self-identity is based in your job? Well, a lot of things, and you probably inherently know it even if you haven't really thought about the individual reasons why. But you've probably experienced at least one of these. In particular, burnout. Because when you are your job, you will spend all of your time at your job. Next, this will have a negative impact on your sense of self-worth and self-esteem. Because our sense of esteem and worthiness at work is based on external validation. Our latest performance review, the latest deal that you've signed, whether or not you crushed your KPIs this quarter. You feel good when your boss is praising you and when you're being celebrated for your achievements at work. However, if something isn't going right and you're facing criticism at your job, or maybe not doing so well, when your identity is based on your job, this is going to have a negative impact on how you sense yourself as a person. The next risk on basing your identity with your job is what happens when your job goes away. Jobs are not permanent, and as we've seen in the tech industry, mounting layoffs are happening right now. There's a lot of uncertainty, and even if you're not moving on by force, at some point you might outgrow your job. You're ready for the next level, but your company isn't willing to promote you. Or you have a better opportunity, but it's not at the right title. This can result in you staying stuck in a job, but it can also be something that holds you in a toxic workplace, and we know the awful psychological and physical impact of those. In addition, when you're working all the time, you're not investing in other areas of your life, and especially in other relationships with your life. We've talked about it before. Coworkers are not your friends. However, it has become a norm to become friends with your coworkers because you spend so much time with them. Knowing that basing your self-identity on your job is not in your own best interest, why does this happen, and how has it become so prevalent in our culture? Well, there's a few things that factor into this. Our world has changed a lot over the past few decades, and I would argue that technology has rapidly accelerated the changes in our lives. Now, technology can be fantastic. For instance, all of the information in the world is at your fingertips. These changes have influenced how we connect to each other as well as how we connect to our jobs. Even just in the last few years, the way that we work has been completely transformed. Being able to work from anywhere in the world is phenomenal. However, the changes that technology has enabled, especially in the workplace, are not all positive. For example, 25 years ago, if you wanted to get a hold of me when I wasn't at the office, you would have had to call my home phone and hope I was there because there was pretty much no other way to get a hold of me. Okay, and I was a teenager. But in the years since then, we have seen email become ubiquitous in the workplace. We have seen smartphones become ubiquitous in your pocket or purse. We're always connected to each other, and we're always connected to work. And this has created an always-on culture. And that always-on culture gives us opportunities to show what hard workers we are, how important we are. Like when you go on a first date and it starts out really great, but then it gets super awkward because all throughout dinner, they're responding to emails because they're so important, they couldn't possibly make someone wait for them. Chaos would ensue. It's also shifted the expectations in terms of responsibility and the actual hours which we work. As all of these shifts within our culture and how we interact and how we establish our sense of self has shifted, companies have really stepped in. I would go so far as to almost call this a codependent relationship, and let me explain myself. Each of us individually has a few basic psychological needs, and this is true for me, for you, and for anyone in the world. We have the need for belonging, competence, purpose, security, and genuine self-esteem. Naturally, work actually helps us meet many of these, and some have been intentionally constructed by companies in order to maximize productivity. First, let's take a look at the belonging. That's feeling like you fit in, you have a place in this world. Despite all the technology that is supposed to connect us, loneliness has been increasing. One of the ways that companies have constructed workplace cultures that become identities is by literally giving them identities. If you work at Facebook, you are a MetaMate. If you work at Google, you're a Googler. I'm an ex-Salesforce employee, and at Salesforce, they call you Ohana. Because why just be a work family when you can also throw in some cultural appropriation? And I actually don't want to say anything bad about Salesforce, I just thought that was a really weird thing when I was there. In fact, if you take a cruise on LinkedIn, you won't just find people calling themselves by these identities. They even list their exes. By deriving these identities, your social identity now becomes associated with your place of work. There are even people who are growing social media followings and side hustles based on this association. Not only is this identity a prestigious one, these companies are highly sought after and notoriously hard to get a job at. It's also a low-key class indicator. If someone works at Facebook, you know that their salary is going to be very high. They're likely in the upper middle class, and it also indicates upward social mobility, which is also a whole thing in this culture. And before I go to the next point, I want to move back really quickly to belonging. Because you know I say coworkers are not your friends. However, workplace culture really depends on people becoming friends and spending an exorbitant amount of time with people. Whereas you used to go and pursue a hobby after work, now you're going to these team building events. And friendships are being normalized within these cultures because you don't want to quit the job where your social life is. It's also not so bad to work late every night when you're working with your friends. In addition, it's demonstrating their competency. Of those employees being laid off from Microsoft and Amazon, they're not going to have any problems getting an interview. Their employment associates them with being top talent, whether or not they actually are top talent. In regards to competence, this also applies with job titles. When you have a certain job title, you have a certain level of competence that has been established. You are really good at what you do, so you got that promotion to manager or director. You're worthy and important, and this really means something to you. Increasingly, people are even looking to work for a purpose. I mean, we spend so much of our time at work, we might as well do something that makes a difference. Now, this even applies outside of the nonprofit world. I come from the tech industry, and pretty much every company has some life-saving mission in which they're really trying to do. Even if it is in the B2B space, and they're just trying to make corporate communications easier or something like that. And of course, we have security. The job is paying you money. Your job is enabling your lifestyle, your standard of living. It enables you to do certain things, which can even contribute to the relationships and associations that you have, all of which you also derive an identity. The only basic psychological need that's not genuinely being created at work is independent self-esteem. Unless you're someone who is intentionally cultivating internal self-esteem, like I talk about all the time on this channel, your validation, your identity, your sense of self-worth is being derived from the feedback that you're given, whether it's a performance review, praise from your boss, or a promotion. All of this results in something called enmeshment. Enmeshment is the blurring of personal boundaries to the point that self-identity becomes unimportant and prevents the development of an independent and stable sense of self, which leads us to the important part of this video. How do you stop defining yourself by your work, especially in a culture that normalizes it? First, if you realize that you have really become your job and your self-identity is based in your job, do not beat yourself up. This is extremely common and it's very easy to fall into for all of the reasons that I just discussed. But also, it's not determinant of your future. You can decide to develop an independent sense of self today and begin the work to do so at any point in time. Also, I want you to be easy on yourself because especially if you're earlier in your career, establishing yourself in your career, there is an immense amount of pressure to really make your work life. And when your work is your life, your work is your identity. I want you to know it doesn't always need to be that way. I also want to address concerns because I know a lot of people say that in order to advance, they need to work all of these hours and things like that. I really want you to fact check yourself, to ask yourself, is that belief true? Because often it's not. Otherwise, how are so many slackers rising the ranks in organizations? Also, I want to be really, really clear here. I am not anti-work. I am not anti-ambition. I am not saying that work isn't important. My point is, there needs to be intention and there needs to be awareness. You need to know what you want your work, your life, and your relationships to look like in order to construct them. This is going to also involve having clear boundaries. Most common in the discourse that we have is there needs to be time and space boundaries for work. Are you willing to work 80 hours a week, or do you want to start reining that one in? There's also going to be relational boundaries that we have in terms of, do we want to be friends with coworkers? Do we want our friendships to reside outside of work? and even psychological in terms of how much importance am I willing to assign work and how I see myself. This is going to require a lot of clarity on your part, because I would love to give you a list of boundaries to maintain and things to think about yourself. However, this is entirely unique to you. And while it's not necessarily easy to do it, I can promise you it's worth it, and the steps to achieve it are not actually that complicated. In fact, I want you to go to this video to start figuring it out.